Good afternoon, everyone. This is Andrew White with Retech Advisors. We are just at 2:30 right now. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes to join, but we will be starting things up shortly. Please hang tight. Okay, everyone. Again, this is Andrew White from Retech Advisors. Thank you for joining this afternoon's Denver Smart Leasing webinar. We're excited to launch this first training and hopefully a series of trainings regarding the Smart Leasing program. I am a manager at Retech Advisors. We are a consulting firm headquartered in the Washington, D.C. area. We've been brought in by the city and county of Denver to help them develop and roll out a smart leasing program. And this, again, is the first and hopefully a series of trainings to help engage the market and educate folks in the Denver area on exactly what smart leasing is and how they can open up the benefits, unlock the benefits of smart leasing in their real estate operations. If we could go next slide, please. So I will be acting as MC today. You'll be hearing from Katrina Manigan at the City of Denver, my colleagues Jacob Dowling and Allison Kirby, as well as Claire Carmelia from Worldwide Technology. And quick agenda rundown for today. We'll start off with an overview of why this program exists and Denver's goals as it pertains to energy efficiency. We'll talk a lot about what is smart leasing and why you should engage in smart leasing. We'll give you some tips for how, activities for specific stakeholder groups. Claire will then present a tenant's perspective on why Worldwide Technologies is interested in smart leasing, and then we'll follow up with how you can take some action, show you our smart leasing pledge and some resources that you can take advantage of as well. Right now, everyone is muted. Toward the end, we will collect questions through the chat feature in the side of your side panel here of the webinar tool, and we will address questions toward the end of the webinar. And with that said, I will turn things over to Katrina Manigan with the City and County of Denver.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar. I want to just frame a little bit about why the City and County of Denver has created this program. So on the slide here, you can see the pie chart shows all of Denver's greenhouse gas emissions. You can see that commercial and industrial buildings account for 41% of our emissions. Multifamily buildings are another 10%. Homes are 12%. And transportation is 36% of our emissions. So combined, buildings are kind of the blue slices of the pie are over half of the city's emissions. And so we have a goal for all of those buildings, or a series of goals for what they have to contribute so that as a city, we reach our broader goal of reducing emissions 80% by 2050. And those interim goals for buildings are that they use 10% less energy in 2020, 30% less in 2030, 50% less in 2050. And we have a goal to cut heating emissions by 50% by 2040, which is probably one of our toughest goals because all of these buildings, as well as all the homes, are heated with natural gas today. So we're looking at a number of strategies to start to reach these goals in buildings. They all, for one baseline requirement we have in place is that all of the buildings measure and report their energy performance every year. So you can go to energizedenver.org and see the energy performance of all of the buildings over 25,000 square feet, because you can't manage what you don't measure. If we go to the next slide, you'll start to see why smart leasing, because we know that of the commercial and industrial buildings, about 12% of those are leased. And that leased space makes up, sort of about 33% of that's office, 50% is warehouses, 17% is retail. And that means in Denver, we have 103 million square feet of leased space that make up 23% of our building stock. Sorry, the 12% is 12% of the whole pie, right? So all greenhouse gas emissions, 12% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from leased space. And leased space, as you'll hear through this webinar, faces some unique opportunities and some unique challenges compared to some of the other buildings. So we've designed this program to really try and unlock the energy efficiency opportunity in the leased space. If we go to the next slide, it takes a little bit of a deeper dive on all of the buildings. So as I'd mentioned, leased space is about 23% of our building stock. So almost a quarter of our buildings are leased, and that's 9% of all of Denver's greenhouse gas emissions, which is quite a lot. So really happy that we have this program. It just launched this last June, so really excited for everyone that's on this call, because you're getting in early and you're going to hear about some of the really cutting edge work in Denver and have a chance to be part of that. And with that, I'll pass the webinar back to Andrew to tell you more.
Thanks, Katrina. If we could go to the next slide. So from our perspective and the way that we're trying to define smart leasing for this city's program is that smart leasing is any activity that better aligns the interests of tenants and landlords to achieve healthy, high performance and energy efficient buildings. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues, Jake Dowling and Allison Kirby, to talk a bit more about that and what it really means at the building level.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrew. And I think it's important, as you all sort of read how we define smart leasing for the purposes of this program, to acknowledge the split incentives and why we think leasing is a tool to unlocking a lot of those energy efficiency opportunities that Katrina just mentioned. So in a commercial building, as I'm sure a lot of you know, the tenant and the landlord often have differing interests in terms of improving energy performance. If the landlord is paying the utility bills, then the tenant probably isn't all that interested in activities or spending any money to improve the energy efficiency of their space. Conversely, if the tenant is paying the utility bill directly, the landlord probably isn't going to invest all that much in the building stock to improve energy efficiency. And the tool that helps us sort of align those interests is the lease. It is the document that defines the tenant-landlord relationship. And it is an opportunity to incorporate a couple of things that we'll get into in a little bit to, as the definition says, achieve healthy, high performance and energy efficient buildings, and sort of set you up in the tenant-landlord relationship for success throughout the life of the occupancy of the tenant. Mike, if you'll go to the next slide. I think it's also important to note that we consider leasing to be a process, right? It is not only the document that gets signed before you occupy a space as a tenant. It is everything from the moment a tenant decides to search for new space in the market, through that lease negotiation and build out, and then all the way through the tenant-landlord sort of relationship throughout the life of the lease in occupancy and operations. And it's important to note that there are opportunities at each of these phases to introduce energy efficiency and sustainability in a way that is mutually beneficial to tenant and landlord, and additionally, the sort of adjacent stakeholders, brokers or space planners or architects or attorneys who are all involved in the leasing process, but are not the two parties sitting opposite each other in the tenant and landlord. So we want to talk a little bit about why we think smart leasing matters and how it can help. And we're going to break this down sort of by those stakeholder groups that I just mentioned. And we're gonna start with tenants. Tenants are sort of the demand side of the equation in the real estate market. And frankly, if tenants start to demand or ask for something, the rest of the market is likely going to move in that direction. And we think that using the lease as a tool, you can do things like improve employee productivity, retention, and sales. You can lower operating costs. You can align with your employee sort of green values, which can help with talent retention and attraction. And all of these things are feasible if you, from the point of deciding you are searching for new space, understand that energy efficiency plays a role in each of these things, and you prioritize that and make it a factor as you approach your potential landlords, your brokers, etc. Next, from a property manager or landlord perspective, sort of the other side of the equation, similarly, you can use the lease to improve asset value by reducing your operating costs and increasing tenant retention. I think if you are able to go to a tenant who's approaching a renewal and say, hey, we'd love for you to stay in this space as a way to entice you to do that, maybe we'll upgrade your lighting, or we'll work with you on a waste reduction program, something like that that would align with their interests. And all of that is to increase your NOI and, like I said, improve your asset value. It drives right to the bottom line. And then similarly to tenants, you can align with your employee green values. Denver is a market that is leading in a lot of sustainability, energy efficiency, green initiatives. And there's a lot of folks who are working for organizations that occupy buildings. This is something that's important to them, and it's a way that you can recruit, attract, retain talent. And then the next group is a bit of a catch-all, admittedly, but there are sort of the stakeholders that are aligned to the leasing process, but are not the ones signing on the dotted line. I think most importantly is brokers, but you also have the attorneys who are helping to draft the lease language, architects who are designing, and designers who are designing the space, and then space planners, interior designers who, once it's constructed and built out, are helping you to lay it out and those sorts of things. And there's an opportunity, if you understand the impact that energy efficiency and sustainability can have for leased space, to grow your client base. This can be a value add to your clients in a way that can help you win more business. It also allows you to be a trusted advisor to your clients to help assist your clients in capitalizing on leasing cost-efficient space. So if you are a broker representative and a tenant representative as a broker, and a new tenant comes to you and says, I'd like to search for new space, there's an opportunity for you to ask a question. Have you thought about how energy efficiency will impact your operating costs over the life of this lease? And you can present yourself in sort of a trusted advisor expert role. Like I said, there's a growing demand for healthy, high-performing buildings, and there's an element of you don't want to get left behind. You want to be conversant in these sorts of things so that you can align yourself with your client's sustainability goals. So I think that was a relatively quick overview of why we think smart leasing matters, and the types of things that you can achieve through using the lease as a tool to achieve energy efficiency and sustainability. But we also want to make sure that we provide some practical steps that you can take today. So I think my colleague Alice and I are going to tag team this a little bit, but by these stakeholder groups, we're going to give you a couple of ideas for things that you can think about implementing across your organization today. And then towards the end of the webinar, we'll give you even more resources where you can go to learn more. So with that, Allison.
Great, thanks, Jake. So diving right into it, some best practices that tenants can take to engage in smart leasing behaviors throughout the leasing process include engaging with your broker to help them understand what your sustainability goals are and how that may play into what type of space you're looking to lease. Or it could be engaging with your landlord to understand what the energy performance of that building is, And that could include installing sub-meters to track energy use of your space, or asking a landlord to provide you with monthly updates on energy consumption. Just making sure that that two-way communication is happening so that you're both benefiting and on the right track to implement those energy efficiency projects. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I'll take this one back from the landlords and property managers perspective. Similarly, a lot of folks in Denver, you know, the benchmarking data is public, are doing great things in their buildings, and they are managing their buildings in an efficient way. And that is an opportunity to market your ability to prospective tenants. And so promoting the energy efficient features of your property to the market, including and probably especially the Energy Star score, which is a 1 to 100 sort of very clear indicator of the efficiency of your building, can be a way that you can attract a new tenant who is valuing these sorts of things. There's also sort of an opportunity to set some standards. So when you are negotiating a lease and you are making concessions in terms of build out, set some standards about the types of equipment and technology that you think should be included in that tenant space. And especially relate that back to the benefit it provides to your prospective tenants. The LEDs that you consider standard in all of your tenant spaces are going to save money for the tenant over the life of their lease. And understanding that and being able to communicate it can be really beneficial. Similarly, sub-metering tenant spaces allows you to pinpoint where opportunities for improvements are and communicate that to the tenants. It can be a value add if you can say, hey, you know, you have used this much on, you've spent this much on energy costs in the last year. We have a couple of things that we could help you with that would drive those energy costs down, and we could sort of share in that cost and benefit. And then the other thing is this market, building operations towards energy management and sustainability, is moving fairly quickly. And so staying on top of what the latest trends are in energy management practices and building operations helps you establish consistencies towards achieving those goals and making sure that you're managing your building in the best way possible.
Then for brokers, these best practices are very much going back to what Jake said before about building your expertise so that you are staying ahead of the demand that is out there for high performing healthy buildings. So those practices can include attending trainings or other educational events and reviewing resources and articulating that value, the increased market value, the lower utility costs for tenants, really being able to communicate the business case to your tenants so that they know that you're ahead of the market and able to position them in the right space that they may be looking for. Next slide, please.
So for attorneys, attorneys play a crucial role here in actually developing the lease language that gets included. And so, you know, very similar to brokers, there's an important component for attorneys to make sure that they're staying on top of the latest market trends. And we anticipate more demand for things like smart leasing or green leasing in the future. Just as an aside, the National Green Lease Leaders Program, which is a national program that aims at identifying and recognizing those organizations that are turning to their lease clauses to drive energy efficiency. They represent more than 1 billion square feet of real estate across the country at this point. So we are seeing a lot of increased demand for this, and we want to make sure that folks like attorneys understand the importance of these clauses. And by attending trainings, other educational events, you start to build that intuition and can then provide that back to your clients to share resources and information about how this benefits in terms of reducing utility costs. And there are a lot of resources out there. We'll talk about this in a minute. There's a lot of resources out there for attorneys where they don't have to start from scratch. BOMA, the Building Owners and Managers Association, has a full model green lease that has a lot of these clauses and language written already that folks can use to tweak and customize to their own needs.
And the last but not least group we have on here is architects, designers, and space planners. So like mirroring basically what brokers and attorneys in that focus, that value proposition, these folks can really benefit from understanding what the value is for their clients to select energy and cost efficient options to help them save money and increase occupant health and productivity. So really building that expertise and sharing information with your colleagues in the industry and resources with tenants, communicating that helps them. Implementing those energy and cost efficient options can help with employee retention, reducing utility costs, or with landlords, letting them know how selecting energy and cost efficient options can improve that net operating income and increase tenant retention. And this really positions you as a trusted advisor, as Jake had mentioned before, that can help with your clients to achieve their sustainability goals. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jake.
I think next we are going to Claire, and I think Andrew has an introduction to Claire. So Andrew, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. So one thing I do want to clarify, we received a question in the middle. We've used the term smart leasing here on this program, and Jake did mention the Green Lease Leaders program. In actual function, there isn't really a difference between those two terms. We use them pretty interchangeably ourselves. We mostly wanted to avoid confusion regarding the Green Lease Leaders program and convey the fact that we think this process is smart business for folks that are in Denver. So after that aside, I will turn it over to Claire Carmelia with Worldwide Technology to give their perspective as a tenant on why smart leasing is important and beneficial. Claire, take it away.
My name is Claire, and I work with Worldwide Technology, and so I'll tell you a little bit about our business. We are a large office, and we take up 3 stories currently in a 5-story building in downtown Denver. And as an IT company, we have a 24-hour service desk, which means we have multiple monitors per worker and large displays, several electronic devices going at all hours. With these things in mind and how much equipment we use, we are currently taking steps to monitor the equipment that we currently use, such as installing some smart strips, but this has been hard to really apply because it's really up to each worker as to whether or not they activate them. But we do have other assurances for efficiency, such as automatic sensors for our lights, thermostats, which we control, and we have LED lights in all of our rooms. And so we've been taking these steps in league already with the certification from the City of Denver, the Certifiably Green Businesses. But there's been a lot of steps that we've had to wait on or figure out how we're going to do because we weren't really sure how we could use the office space that we currently have and know what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do depending on our property management company. Next slide, please. So next steps are, we're currently looking to expand. We've already found a new office space now in downtown Tech, and so we're going to be signing a new lease this coming October, which is only a month, not a couple weeks away, really. And so this provides a brand new opportunity to take a look at current practices and improve what we're doing. So we're planning to utilize our desk space better, that will improve our shared spaces, such as having larger desks with multiple employees, which reduces the number of outlets necessary for equipment, and it makes it easier to use those smart strips that I was mentioning, because once we are using those for multiple employees, we can go ahead and set timers go down the row of chairs. So we're going to have large desks seating perhaps about 8 employees. And so if we install to begin with, smart strips to watch for fan and power leakage, then A, we know that they're already there. And B, it's not going to be up to the employee, who currently we work in our own individual cubicles. It won't be only them, watching for their own equipment usage. We can all help each other to guard against what equipment is being left on, hooked up, and left overnight. And what this also does is it provides us a new opportunity to work with the property management now that we're signing a new lease, to get them to be on board with what we're doing so that we don't have to wait or try to figure out what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, such as with our current furniture, are we allowed to get rid of it if it doesn't work out for how we're using the space, and such as our sensors, are we allowed to install new automatic motion sensors for the lights. So now that we are talking to the property management from the get-go, they know exactly what our goals are, and so they'll be on board with us for our energy efficiency utilage. And then, of course, we'll have a name to go to with these questions. So next slide. And I mentioned some of these already, but the benefits of this leasing program is that since we're encouraging the building of the relationship from the very start, we don't have to do the research to find out exactly who to talk to, which I'm going to let everyone know. It took me about 8 months to find out exactly who I should be talking to when it came to questions about our office space and energy usage. There was really nowhere to start because no one in our office knew anything about our property management company except for the company name. And when I got the company name, even that was just the headquarters, right? We didn't get the Denver office. And then after we got the Denver city office, then it was, well, who do you talk to that is actually in charge of your building? And so it really took quite a while to get any callbacks or get information on who exactly we should be reaching out to. So with this program in mind, we can make sure that we already have somebody in place, like I said before, at the very beginning, at the start of the lease, that knows that this is what the tenants want to do, is to be responsible for their energy consumption. And as Katrina mentioned before, what we've started doing is asking for those reports from our property management. And so we ask them for our metrics so that we can measure our year-over-year usage and find out exactly where we stand. And getting a hold of those reports, I now have a great relationship with our property management, someone there who's getting me that information. But it took quite a while to build that rapport. So this provides someone you can talk to, and then hopefully you can, after you have that relationship, you can say, hey, now that we have this space, we know what we want to do when we renew the lease, or can we install motion sensors, or can we, change the furniture that we have in the space? What can we do to achieve our goals for, energy efficiency? Next slide. So some obstacles that have arisen so far for signing the Smart Lease pledge is really just getting corporate approval. I don't think that we realized every company, as we know, has a different image they want to portray. And so it really just comes down to ensuring that your company is on board. And depending on the size of the company, that can mean multiple things. And so our company is very large, like I said, and so the headquarters are not in Denver, they're in St. Louis. And the offices that we have are all around the world. We've got offices in Hong Kong and Japan and Europe. And so, when it comes to marketing, they really want to be sure that we're all on board with sending the same message. So it came down to getting a hold of our marketing company, and then getting a hold of HR, and then having some meetings that perhaps, I didn't know who I would exactly need to talk to or track down. But once I did, and once you really explain what it is you're doing and why, they were all on board, and they were really excited that I was going ahead with this. So it turned out positive, but it did take a few extra steps, because every time I asked, hey, can we just go ahead and sign this Smart Leasing pledge for Denver, it came down to, well, we better make sure that this is something that the whole team is on board with. So fortunately for us, we did get that approval, and I'm really excited to say that now we've signed the pledge, which is fantastic. And we're working with the new property management company for the space in downtown Tech. So hopefully we can get them to sign the pledge. And so we're moving ahead in a very positive direction. And fortunately, our HR and marketing has found a way to word exactly what we're doing and put it on our company's homepage in such a way that it aligns with the values and the mission statement that they already have there. Next slide. And so I just want to say overall that we're really lucky to live in Denver, a city that is taking the initiative to create a program like this. Because as a large IT business, we definitely have an influence and a need to represent our industry and take initiative to press toward the goals, not only our own company goals, but the goals of the community and of Denver to achieve that 80% emissions reduction by 2050. And so for me, the tenant, as a tenant, this pledge is important because it's empowering to have a meaningful hand in this climate change conversation and in the direction for the community. And so the Smart Leasing program enables relationship building with our property management, which increases our ability to have a say in what we do and to strategize and make changes toward our efficiency in cooperation with one another. And it makes this goal not just ours, but the goal of our property management as well, so that we're both in alignment with increasing our energy efficiency goals. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Claire. That was a really great summary, and I'm happy to hear that things are moving forward after 8 months of trying to find the right contact. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jake to talk about the Smart Leasing pledge that we've created for the Smart Leasing program, and how you can start to take action and where to start really with getting involved in the program.
Thank you, Andrew. So as Claire mentioned, one of the first things that you can do as part of the Denver Smart Leasing program is to take our pledge. We want to demonstrate to the market that there's a lot of interest in smart leasing, and this pledge is our way to do that. Whether you sign on as a company or an individual, we really just want you to recognize that smart leasing has some benefits, and where you think it might be applicable within your business practices, you're going to do what you can to educate yourself and educate others and implement those best practices. So really what we're asking is that you commit to having conversations about energy efficiency during pre-lease, site selection, lease negotiation, and build out and occupancy operations that you might not be having at this point. We'll send out these slides after the webinar, and you'll be able to click that link. You could also log on now. That will take you to the Smart Leasing page on the City and County of Denver's website, which gives you a lot more information, including all of the things that Allison is about to talk about. But it also has a big, I think the button is green, link to the actual pledge, and you can sign up there. Beyond the pledge, which we really encourage all of you to take and sign up for, we are going to offer tools, training, and resources that help tenants, landlords, and other stakeholders work towards these goals of healthy, high performance and energy efficient buildings. So Andrew mentioned that this is the first in what we hope is a series of trainings. We've already published a whole bunch of tools on the Smart Leasing website, the City of Denver, and we've linked to even more resources that were developed as part of the Green Lease Leaders program or other initiatives that will be helpful as well. But if you do take that pledge, you do get the opportunity to get a little more expert guidance, essentially from the team that you've heard from today. You can consider us a hotline if you've got a question about going into site selection and you want our opinion on the questions you should be asking. We're happy to help you with that. If you're a broker and a tenant comes to you and starts asking questions that you're not quite prepared to answer, we're happy to be a resource to help point you in the right direction. And so by taking that pledge, you have access to our team of expert advisors to help you along this path. And you would also be eligible for some additional recognition. One of the most important things that we are offering or that we've heard from the market is that if we can demonstrate that others are doing this, the rest of the market is going to follow. And so we want to profile the leaders in the industry who are doing things with smart leasing, like we just heard from Claire, in a full case study so that we can give you credit for your leadership and the activities that you've taken. And you can get some recognition for those efforts. So I think with that, I will turn it back over to Allison, and she will run through some of the resources that are available on the website. And I would also mention that as she's doing that, if you have specific questions, feel free to enter them into the question box, and we'll address those once Allison wraps up here.
Thanks, Jake. So just talking through some of the resources that are available to you all, we have the program landing page, the web page here, which will be made available when we send out the presentation to you all. This includes some additional information about the program. It also directs you to the pledge. And then in the drop downs, we have them tailored to specific stakeholders. And within them, it will give you access to a number of resources that I'll walk through over the next slides. Next slide, please. So we've also created these helpful guidance documents to assist you in taking action on some of those best practices that we outlined earlier. A few examples are we created this site selection criteria for tenants that will that outlines different steps that you can take, whether it's building a team of experts that are knowledgeable on the green market that's out there, or it's how can you implement your sustainability requirements in your letter of intent. So it's all about how you can really set the stage for before the lease to get you in the right step of having that efficient space. Another example we have, we've created for both tenants and landlords, are a list of clauses and provisions that can be incorporated into the lease document to establish a formalized, collaborative, and mutually beneficial landlord and tenant relationship to lead to those energy savings. Next slide, please. Oops, sorry, go back one. Thank you. And we've also created these stakeholder-specific best practice documents. So they are a one-stop shop for what the program is all about, why it's important to that specific stakeholder, and then what they can do. So you'll see those familiar action steps that we talked through before on there. And then at the bottom, it helps direct you to some supportive links, whether it's links that we've compiled that are already existing in the industry, or the resources that we've created can also be found there as well. Next slide, please. And again, we have these additional resources which we've included in the slide deck here. Those also can be found on the web page. They can be found on the one-pagers, and you can also, we'll have these handed out to you guys, and they'll include in the presentation as well. Next slide, please. And then some other steps that you can do to take action are you can connect with us at our smartleasing@denvergov.org email address. And that is where you will, along with that, and then if you take the pledge, you will get access to expert advisors to assist you with implementing some smart leasing best practices, as well as gain that free recognition and promotional materials. You also can access the Smart Leasing webpage. When you look at the Smart Leasing Program Denver website, you can sign up for our newsletter if you're interested in just getting some periodic information on what's new with the program. And then lastly, you can spread the word with your colleagues by using these stakeholder-specific one-pagers. And after you've signed the pledge, or if you want to help promote the program, you can use #SmartLeasing through the Twitter sphere as well. And with that, I'll turn it back to Andrew to wrap things up.
Thanks, Allison. So it looks like a few questions have come in the last few minutes. We'll be happy to jump on those. If you have other questions, please feel free to send them through the chat function, or excuse me, through the questions function. As you can see on the slide, all of our email addresses are here. And we are ready and willing to take your emails at any time if you have questions about the program after this webinar. So looking at the questions that we've got, Jake, I think this one I'm going to send your way. The question is, do you plan to promote any continuing education courses for brokers and interface with CCIM and other groups?
Sure. This is a great question. I think that broadly, continuing education credits we recognize are often an important motivator for a lot of real estate practitioners, and that's something that we are definitely interested in pursuing. Currently, we are definitely pursuing continuing education courses for attorneys. We have had some conversations about doing it for brokers as well. And if that is something that's of interest to you, I would really encourage you to reach out. Often we find that for us to get continuing education credits for some of the content that we offer and that kind of thing, we need industry partners who are aligned with CCIM or other groups who can help us sort of spearhead that effort and offer their voice and opinion as this is something that's important. So yes, it's definitely part of our plan. We are pursuing it in a number of different fashions, but we would very much encourage you to reach out to us via email so that we can connect directly about the best way to go about that for sort of you and your stakeholder group.
Thanks, Jake. Another question we received was, how do you communicate the benefits of smart leasing to brokers or leasing agents who are not interested or skeptical due to misconceptions that they think it's too complicated or not worth the effort? I'll start on this one, and then Jake, see if you want to add on as well. I think the first thing I would do is try to bring some of the resources that we've created to their attention. I think there's a lot of power in the customer's hands. So if you are a tenant or a landlord and you want to focus on sustainability, the broker or leasing agent should be responsive to your needs. So if you tell them that that's what you're interested in, hopefully they would respond and try to help you find space that meets those needs. I think there's another opportunity as well, again, to share the resources that we've created, share some of the industry resources. There's a lot of interesting research out there showing the potential financial value of leasing or occupying a high performance building. So I would start there as well. Jake, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think brokers in particular are a group that is motivated by getting a deal done. And we want to make sure that we are positioning this program as not anything that would get in the way of that. And to Andrew's point, the best way to do that is to start with sort of the financial metrics. Andrew mentioned some specific financial research, and if you reach out, we can provide you some links about the impact of having a healthier building on employee absenteeism and sort of the financial benefits of that. Or similarly, the time it takes to lease a green building versus a not green building. And so, echoing Andrew's sentiment, I think whatever you can do to connect the value of smart leasing back to the business case, that's going to be the most motivating for brokers and leasing agents. And like Andrew said, we are happy to help you do that. So I encourage you to reach out via email and we can provide more specifics, some of the links to the research that we mentioned and those sorts of things.
All right, great. Thanks, Jake. Any other questions from the audience? I'm not seeing any more in our queue.
I've got one while we give folks one more opportunity to submit a question. But Katrina, do you want to talk for just a minute about some of the steps the city has taken in their leased space?
Sure, Jake. So the city, of course, owns a lot of our own office spaces, but we lease about half of the building in the Denver Post building, and which is just across the street from our main city office building, the Wellington Webb building. And so we sat down recently with the building management of the Denver Post building. There's a privately owned, privately managed building. So we sat down just to have a conversation about energy in the building. And we started really on a positive note because the building cut energy use 19% from 2017 to 2018, which we already knew from the benchmarking data. So we sort of said, gosh, how did you do that? That's great to cut energy use by 19%. And they told us about what they had done. They also, the management of the building said that they had planned to reach out to us as their tenant to see if they could stop operating the building for 5 hours every Saturday, since the city doesn't operate on Saturdays. So it was a great chance for them to bring a question to us. And we similarly asked if during the summer, the temperature set points could be higher, because in the city's own building, there's a policy that they operate at 72 to 76 every day during the summer. And the mayor sends out an email saying, take off your suit jackets. We're going to save energy this summer. And so it'll be a little bit warmer in all of our buildings. So we asked them if they could do that in our spaces, and they're looking into that. So it was a great just conversation about energy management. We found some interesting ideas to explore together, and we're continuing to talk. So I hope that's kind of a good example of the kind of conversations we're talking about with smart leasing, especially when a tenant's already in a space.
Thanks, Katrina. I think that's a really great example of how you can collaborate, and even if it is one building at a time, there's relationships to be formed here, which I think is a theme that Claire touched on as well. And we did get one more question, so I will talk to that a little bit, and then I think we will let everyone go a few minutes early. But the question is, in addition to the case studies to highlight local leaders, is there any interfacing your group can do to highlight brokers, tenants, etc., and local green lease leaders that the group can learn from, speak with, etc.? And the answer is yes. So we are continuing to do trainings like this. We will continue to do, or start to do, in-person meetings as well to engage with folks. Katrina spoke at one of the DIMCAR meetings a few weeks ago, I guess a month or so ago, to talk to brokers in the area. And we're going to continue to build examples and case studies specific to Denver to help you all engage with your peers and see what your neighbors are doing. So keep an eye out for that stuff. Again, that's another reason to take the pledge, is so you can get access to that stuff as soon as it comes out, and be invited to those events and other webinars like this. So yeah, we are working on that and hope to have more for you in the near term. Without any other questions, I think we will wrap up for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you found this useful. Again, all of our email addresses are listed here. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to share our knowledge, resources, and just have a great chat with you. So thanks very much. Have a good one.